As another week turns, as you can see, we're still having problems with the 39. Last week we had Tony rebuild the starter, install a new cone on it, and there's still some problems with some final adjustments on this carburetor, and the car is just not running. So what he's going to do is he's going to dig in a little bit further and figure out exactly what is going on. We're actually changing up Tony's responsibilities, and he's going to be down in the shop a little bit more, doing some of the things that you can see here, digging around in the engines and figuring out what's going on.
So what it's doing is the bowls fill, the float's sticking up, and it's letting the fuel just keep running past the bowl. You know what I mean? The float's not coming down to shut the fuel off. It's not shutting them metering valves off.
You think it's not getting enough fuel?
It's getting more than enough fuel.
Well, after we played with the carburetor a little bit more, we determined that the car is getting, or the engine is getting too much fuel. So what we're having Tony do is go back in, reset the floats, then he's going to reset the jets and try to figure out fuel and air mixture. Tony's coming out of our body shop, and probably in the next several weeks you'll see him more involved with the folks down here in the fabrication shop in making final adjustments. I mean, Tony's expertise has really been in muscle cars and, you know, making these type of adjustments. So we're going to use him more in that capacity in the near future. What they're doing right now is trying to find out the exact float level that we need to set this carb at. Once that's done, as I indicated before, we're going to go back in and reset the jets to make sure that the air and fuel mixture is in fact right and accurate. This is a little bit intricate as far as trying to get it set exactly where we need it to be. So they're going to play with it a little bit more and try to figure out the best location of the float itself. You know, this is, as we talked about in several past episodes, this is not a project that we were involved with from the beginning. So we're kind of working backwards, trying to determine what the problems are and where the problems lie.
I fell into a burning ring of fire. I went down, 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 and the flames went higher.
That's a cooker. I was getting ready to do the same. Smell the hair burning? I needed to trim anyway.
Well, first off, I don't know anything about C4s. So it doesn't have an electronic lockup? Does the C4 have an electronic lockup? Okay, so that eliminates that. I will tell you right now, there's your Ford expert right there. Worked in a Ford dealership as a service manager for how many years?
Mikey.
Let me go get Mikey. Mikey!
Come here.
That's why you should put Chevys in these cars.
Start the engine. That purrs like a kid. Put it in gear and it dies immediately. It doesn't even flutter or anything. If you sit there and try to feather it while it's there, if the whole car shakes like this, like the transmission is locked up. Now,
is the linkage set up right?
Well, it'll go into gear.
Got all the gears.
It goes into gear. You can hit reverse, neutral, the whole net.
This thing's not new enough to have a torque converter clutch. There's no wires to the tranny.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know what year the transmission is.
Right.
However, look at this setup. Enough vacuum. Look at that little line to this little line here. Now, when we do that, when it leap forward and everything, this was off.
What happens if we hook it up?
I don't know. Let's try that.
Well, we've determined the exact positioning of the vacuum lines, and now what we're going to do is take it out for a test drive. The car's still not idling in drive, so what we're trying to determine is there enough power to get the car going, number one. Number two, if there is enough power, to make sure that the transmission is shifting properly through the gears itself. So hopefully we'll get it fixed.
drop the cross member down 1/8 of an inch, just make a spacer plate where that crossover goes. You know what I mean? Just put a washer in there.
That crossover sits on top of the frame now.
Oh, bolt it underneath. Move it to the underside. That'll tilt your engine a little bit. You'll just make that up when you set up your rear differential.
So if we have the firewall clearance with a distributor, if we can tilt it back that far.
Only one way to find out. Worst case scenario is don't run an HEI, run a small style distributor with new electronics in it. A points type distributor with a Hall effect switch inside. You'll never notice it. It'll give it more of a vintage look too. It'll look better with the fuel injection system I want to run.
Okay, we have Rob and Tyler doing a final fit and finish on the firewall. What they got to make sure is that we've got enough clearance for obviously the engine and any of its components such as the distributor and anything that will be hanging off the engine itself. We also got to try to determine bulkhead lines and where they're going to end up penetrating the firewall into the engine compartment. We're going back in and taking a look at pedal installation and where that's going to fit through the firewall and or through the actual floor pans themselves. What they're going to have to do is determine whether we're going to bolt these in or whether we're going to weld them in and make sure that everything's fit. These original 32s had wood floor inserts, so what we're doing is transforming them over to metal now.
What I'm thinking is to fill this in there, what could you fill it with? So that you wouldn't have that recess, you know what I mean? Or else you just trim this off here. If you need to take a tranny out or anything like that, you'd have to lift the body. So that's why they recommend you do this, because you need a way to be able to tip it in. You know what, bolt it all in. Just bolt it all in.
Including the firewall?
Yeah, bolt it in.
Okay.
And the reason why you ever have to pull an engine or something like that, always can take the firewall the hell out of it.
Well, here we are back day 2 on the 39 again. After my test drive yesterday, we kind of figured that it might not all be in the fuel and air mixtures and the adjustments needed to be made on the carburetor. So what we're doing now is going in and determining whether or not we've got the correct spark and their timing set and trying to determine whether in fact that we're getting proper hot spark. So hopefully that will be in fact the case and we can get this thing underway.
No.
Yeah, it's a little rougher than it first looked. It's definitely needs some love.
Very pleased. I think there's some work, some areas that are going to need a little bit of attention, but I think all in all, when all said and done, this is going to really turn out to be a very nice restoration.
Well, we're back here on the 36 panel truck. Pap's trying to determine the actual location of the fuel neck Tony's installing the column for the last time, making any final adjustments on the length of the shafts and where the location of the knuckles are. What we've done is we've actually changed the location of where you'll fuel the vehicle. As you can see, we're installing a gas door on the outside of the body. If you look below my hands here, that's where the original gooseneck come out and where the fueler neck was. So what they're doing is doing the installation of the floor, and Keith's making any final adjustments on the electric underneath. So hopefully we can get this project completed and get it out of here so that we can back on our customers' cars.
Even for the column?
Hey Josh, remember, when you guys did these, remember I said you gotta make sure the hood sides fit on here? Well, we're gonna have to re-drill the holes underneath because that's not where it belongs.
We'll get it taken care of. We just need to be a little careful on how we approach it and making sure that we don't scratch anything. So we'll get the thing done, hopefully in the next day or two, and get it back to the trim shop. So, you know, the car is going to be beautiful once it's done. Unfortunately, like I said, it is a little bit more time consuming doing it this way, but with Rob's expertise and my determination, I'm sure that we'll get the project done and done very quickly here. So the project we turned around and, you know, finished before we actually had everything fit. And this is why we started out building our own cars, so that we could learn from our own mistakes. We've got the process down for our customers' cars and it's gone a lot smoother, but we still got to finish this project up and make sure that we can get it out the door here in the very near future. You know, those final fit and finishes shouldn't have been done on this car after it was painted, but here we are. We're going to have to do what we need to do. Yeah, we're trying to fit up a dashboard that doesn't fit in the car. We're going to take and put into this car a 40s dash, 40 Ford dash, and it's if you know anything about these types of vehicles, as the cars got older, they got wider. The 32 is probably about 4 inches narrower than a 40. So the 32 dash that was in there, we needed more room for the instrument panels and all of the accessories that we're putting into this car. So we're going to fit this dash up and hopefully it'll look good.
Tested as far as I could because we didn't have an engine that ran. You know, all I could do was make sure I had power getting out there. And now we actually have an engine that works.
We did not wire this car. This car was wired. We just straightened out the wire.
Well, we had once again some problems with 39. And what you don't see, and what we neglected to film or to air this week's episode, was that when we initially took the car for a test drive, we determined that there was no compression. The engine was dead. We called one of the local engine builders and had them come down and take a look at it, and they determined that there's no compression. So what we ended up having to do is pull the engine back out, and they rebuilt it in a week, you know, took care of us. We got the engine back in, and now, you know, like I said, as you can see from the episode here, we're just making those final adjustments. We also determined that the electronic system in the car itself wasn't producing enough hot spark. And that's where we ended up determining that it wasn't as much a fuel-air mixture, that it was, you know, the spark just wasn't hot enough to burn the fuel. So as you can see from the flame that it shot up into Tony's face, that's generally an indication that there's too much fuel being accumulated in the engine and not burning. So we've rectified that, and hopefully we'll get the car on the road here very shortly. As you can see, the 70 Challenger did come back from the Media Blaster. The process that they go through when they Media Blast these cars are they'll use some kind of material, whether it be baking soda, walnut shells, sand. On a car of this nature, they did use crushed walnut shells. What it does is doesn't warp the panels and also removes all the debris from the car itself. So what they'll do is they'll remove all of the materials from the actual metal of the car. That way you can determine exactly what kind of condition the metal's in. So, and as you can see from this episode, the car was a lot worse off than what we really originally anticipated. Well, when you Media Blast, you also not only remove all the old materials, but when you're putting new materials on, it's going on to bare metal. Instead of trying to cover up somebody else's chemistry, you know, the mixing of materials as far as the type of plastic you use or the type of primers or sealers or even paints. So we've had the experience in the past that we unfortunately had a car that a guy brought in and said just wanted it painted. We ended up painting it, and actually it was aired on this program before, which was the 52 Buick. We ended up painting the car and it bubbled. And it bubbled because of the fact it wasn't the material we put on top, it was the material that was underneath. So we have learned over the years, we recommend to all of our customers that you do Media Blast the car if you want the show car finish that you're looking for. So, you know, it's not the worst car I've ever seen. It's not the best car I've ever seen too, but it looked pretty darn good with the paint on it. But, you know, again, it goes back down to the same thing as we've talked about before. With these types of cars, you generally can anticipate certain areas being bad. This car, those areas were actually perfect. Those cars weren't in bad shape at all, and it turned out that, you know, areas that we would have never anticipated. Like I said, the gentleman who did the final finish underneath the hood in the actual engine compartment was an artist, because there was a lot of patch panels put into that car that it obviously was raced at some point in time, and we've talked about that in the past couple episodes, but this car must have been raced and it was reinforced in areas that we couldn't see. So we just have to deal with it at this point in time. I think Bill was a little bit shocked when the car got back from Media Blast, as we all were. I mean, you know, it goes back down to the same thing. Those are areas you can't see, and he took it in stride. I give him that. And I think in the back of his mind, he kind of thought that there was going to be some problem areas. Now, he knew that at least that one quarter was going to be really bad because he remembered when his father wrecked the car. So, and his father repaired it, and by the way, did a fantastic job, you know. But the other areas that were repaired after the car was sold, he had no inkling that any of those areas existed. So I think shocked, but not totally overwhelmed with it all. So I think he took it in stride. Well, you know, 36 has been one of those ongoing projects and one of those items that I want to get done. Everybody around here wants to get done, but we want to make sure it's done right. And you know, as we've talked about throughout the episodes, you know, this car was one of those first ones we started on here at Blades Rod Shop, and that's why we did what we did. And when we first opened up, we built our own cars to make sure that we could get a process down, to make sure that we weren't going to lose time and effort, plus financially for our customers, that we weren't going to make the type of mistakes that we made on our own cars. So we lived and learned by those mistakes, and this is the final car that was basically a prototype for Blades Rod Shop. So now that we're getting down to the nearing of the end, we want to make sure we do all the final fit and finish and make sure that it's done right. As you can see, we've made some subtle changes. But those changes take time and effort, and unfortunately money. So like we installed that new gas door. I didn't like the look of the original filler neck coming out the side of the body. For as clean as that car actually turned out, as far as taking a lot of the extras off the body itself, I didn't want that big gooseneck sticking out the side, so we turned around and put that fuel door in it, and it just, you know, really is going to look nice. You know, one of my goals here at Blades, or one of my responsibilities, is to make sure that we utilize our talent in the proper ways. And with Rob rejoining us, Rob's, got a number of years' experience in body work. His expertise is really in body. Tony, on the other hand, not only has an expertise in doing body work, but mechanically inclined. I mean, the guy has been around muscle cars and cars all of his life. So we're going to utilize his talents in that capacity from here forward. So you're going to see a change in his job description. We've actually put him full-time on that Challenger, not only to do the body work and changing out panels and stuff like that, but he's also going to do the mechanical aspects of it. So we're going to kind of change up his responsibilities around here and get him more heavily involved with doing that type of mechanical work versus the body work. Yeah, the 32, the two-door sedan. We like I said, we did a fit and finish on the firewall. And also made sure that we had the clearances that we needed. But that project's come along fine, but it goes back down to the same thing. That's a short build time that we have on that car. That car's got to be done and down to the folks by mid-December. So we're really struggling to make sure that we maintain that schedule on that car. Not only is it a high-end car, but we obviously have got a tremendous amount of toys that we've got to put in there for them. So yeah, when we turned around and talked about, as you could see throughout the episode here, is talked about whether or not to bolt in the firewall or weld it in, the same way with the floor pans. Do we bolt them in or weld them in? Again, it goes back down to accessibility. Back in the day when these cars were built, there was a mixture of wood and metal used. Now, in today's environment, we like to stick with all metal because we know it's structurally stronger and it will last longer. So we made the decision at that point in time to go with a metal floor, and quite frankly, I like a smooth finish from underneath of a car. It makes it more of a show car finish. So we elected to go with welding all the panels in versus bolting everything in. And the decision of welding in the firewall versus bolting the firewall in is really just a personal preference. It's also a safety issue too. Where we're going to end up running the steering in there, we're probably going to need to strengthen the firewall to make sure that from a safety standpoint that the car is the car is safe. So yeah, this 32 is going to be really a high-end car. Not that the cars that you saw in last year's episodes, but this year we're focusing more on traditional style street rods. So this is probably going to be one of the higher end builds we'll do this year, and stay tuned because I tell you there's some tricks that are going into this car that a lot of people out there haven't even thought of in street rodding. So things that I haven't seen on cars yet. So we're really looking forward to it.
Oh, life could be a dream if I could tell me I'm the only one that you love. Life could be a dream, sweetheart. Hello, hello again. Shaboom and
The buffing pad. I guess so. I looked over and let's smoke him. Buffing pad.
Buffing's pad?
Yeah.